Good morning, everyone. This video is on medical necessity in ABA therapy and autism services. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my perspective on medical necessity in ABA and when it relates to the autism spectrum, which I'm on. I'm on the Asperger side of the autism spectrum. And so I want you to think about I want you to think about two words together here. One, medical necessity in terms of ABA, and two, social value in terms of ABA. So I'm going to draw this argument for the conclusion of my thesis here is that if a skill is socially valued to me, then the skill is medically necessary, in my opinion. And we'll talk a little bit about this, but let's talk about first, let's kind of set the framework for this. And let's talk about different levels of social skills or different levels of adaptive living skills. So let's talk about someone learning how to tie their shoe, for example. The adaptive living skill of tying our shoes versus an adaptive living skill or social skill of flirting with someone, or like building a friendship. Two totally different skill sets required to do those things. Now, first of all, let's talk about the difference between a social skill and an adaptive living skill. Many people believe there's a difference, for one. A social skill is how you interact with someone else, in my opinion, and an adaptive living skill doesn't really have anything to do with how you make someone else feel socially. So like an adaptive living skill like coin identification or tying your shoe has no effect on how you make another person feel emotionally. As to where your higher level social skills can have an effect relating to someone else, how you make them feel emotionally and things like that. So that's a little bit of a difference. Now, I would argue to you that in order to live a good life, your best life as someone on the autism spectrum, that those social skills are actually very important adaptive living skills. But here's the thing, okay? Let's look at the skill, medical necessity of a skill set, two skill sets. One skill would be to tie your shoe, learning how to tie your shoe. The other skill would be learning how to flirt with someone. Two totally different skills. Now, one would say that an insurance company, for example, third-party payer, would probably tell you that tying your shoe is more medically necessary than learning how to flirt. So basically what it comes down to, the lower level of social skill, the lower level of adaptive living skill there is, the more likely it is to be proven medically necessary. Which, in my opinion, is backwards. Now, obviously, I'm biased a little bit, right? Because I'm Asperger syndrome, so I have a lot of the adaptive living skills down pretty well. The social skills are more my struggle, so I have a biased opinion. But let me explain this. So when you take a lower level skill like tying your shoe, for example, it's actually, you know, we talk sometimes about skills that are actually easy to teach versus skills that are hard to teach, and skills that are more likely to carry across different contexts and different environments versus skills that are not as likely to carry across different environments and different contexts. So skills that are more likely to generalize and apply, we want to put more effort into teaching those, and skills that are less likely to generalize and apply, we want to put less effort into teaching those. However, my argument here is that when we teach someone how to tie their shoe, I don't really have a concern of that skill generalizing and applying across different contexts and different environments. And so, for example, like if you teach someone how to tie their shoe in the autism center, it's more than likely they're going to be able to tie their shoe outside of the autism center, at home, at church if their shoe comes untied, at school if their shoe comes untied. In my opinion, if we teach that skill in the autism center, the more likely it is to be able to automatically generalize and apply in different settings and different contexts. Because the only thing that I could see, in my opinion, that would interrupt that or prevent that skill from generalizing and applying in different contexts and different settings would be the contingency of anxiety in a certain environment or a certain context. So if an individual with autism develops anxiety at school, that might prevent them from forgetting how to tie their shoe that you taught them how to tie their shoe because they're anxious. So that anxiety, that mental health component, could get in the way of that skill generalizing and applying, but there's likely to be no learning component or learning environment that's going to get in the way of an individual with autism learning how to tie their shoe in different contexts and different social environments. And so now let's look at it on the opposite end of that. Let's talk about the skill of flirting with someone, or, for example, making reciprocal conversation for a skill. So like, let's talk about something like that. Now we're going to deal with something like reciprocal conversation. We teach that in the Autism Center. But the problem is that's a higher level social skill. It takes a lot more effort. There's a lot more learning involved. There's a lot more response effort. And so now we take that, we teach that skill in the Autism Center. Now it's time to go out in the community and teach that at church, at school, at the library, at the supermarket. So many different contexts and environments that we have to teach that skill in. And now all of a sudden, because there's more learning involved in it, because it's a harder skill, it's more likely that that skill is not going to automatically generalize and apply in those different contexts and different settings. And we're going to have to go in and really work on teaching that skill in those different contexts and different environments. So I really want us to start thinking about a couple of things here. One is that while lower level skills are actually more likely to be approved as medically necessary, it's those higher level skills that actually are more difficult to learn, more difficult to teach, that actually have, I would argue, as someone who's Asperger's syndrome, now obviously someone who's nonverbal is going to have a different argument, but I would argue with someone with level 1 autism and Asperger's syndrome that it's those higher level skills that are harder to generalize and apply that have more social value. And for me, increased social value means increased medical necessity. And so, you know, I really think that sometimes the insurance companies have it backwards. They think, oh, he needs to learn how to tie a shoe. That's medically necessary. But for me, what's more medically necessary would be that, oh, let's teach him how to ask someone for help in learning how to tie his shoe. So like, is the skill of tying your shoe medically necessary? No, because one, I can get Velcro shoes for the child. I can avoid tying shoes. I can't avoid reciprocal conversation. I can't avoid socializing with my peers if I want to develop a social relationship. So that's the first thing, is that let's block this myth that the lower level the skill is, the higher medical necessity it is, because I believe that's false and misleading to many people and doing people with autism an injustice when it comes to living their best lives. Now let's talk about the second aspect of that, which I think, let me think about this for a second. I lost my train of thought, but what I think is very interesting is that because the skill has to generalize and apply in different contexts and different environments, and it's a higher level social skill, in my opinion, it becomes more medically necessary due to the fact that it's just more, there's more weight to it, and there's more power in that skill. How do you make someone feel? That's powerful. And so like, I just think that when we talk about medical necessity, we often think of these lower level skills versus the higher level skills. And I think it's backwards, because I think that for me, well, again, it depends on where you're at on the autism spectrum, right? So if you're nonverbal, reciprocal conversation doesn't really have any social value, and therefore it doesn't have any medical necessity. But if you're a high verbal learner and you want to learn, reciprocal conversation skills, that skill is going to have a heck of a lot of social value for you, because you're going to be able to develop friendships and relationships and things like that. And so I just think it's very important to have this conversation about medical necessity. Now, here comes a different question. So not only is it medical necessity for me to learn how to have reciprocal conversation with my BCBA in the Autism Center, or my RBT in the Autism Center, it's actually the question of now, does it become medically necessary in different environments and different contexts? So now, is it for, just to explain that in a better way that you can understand, is not only is it medically necessary for me to learn the skill, but is it medically necessary for me to learn how to generalize and apply the skill in different contexts and different social environments? Which the answer to that is yes, absolutely, 100%. I need to learn how to generalize and apply that skill in different settings and different contexts. And so, I think that insurance companies have a long way to go when it comes to medical necessity. We as behavior analysts, I'm not a behavior analyst, but the field of behavior analysis has a long way to go when writing treatment plans and asking for medical necessity. We just need to understand what we need to do and things like that. And so I think that, I just really think I want to talk about social value and the relationship to medical necessity. There isn't a lot of, in my experience, in my life experience, there wouldn't be a lot of social value in learning how to tie your shoe. No one is going to praise you in a friendship. Good job, Travis. You learned how to tie your shoe as a 13-year-old kid or as a 27-year-old adult. Good job, Travis. You learned how to identify a quarter. Like nobody's going to be, good job, Travis. You can tie your shoe. Like that's ridiculous. Because it's an expected skill. It's expected that you have that skill and things like that. Now, a higher level social skill. So basically what I'm saying is you're not likely to get a lot of positive reinforcement for learning how to tie your shoe outside of the reinforcement you get from your reinforcement you get from your BCBA and your RBT. So there becomes another issue is that receiving reinforcement, when getting reinforcement, that also generalizes and applies in different settings and different contexts. And when you're tying your shoe, the only level of reinforcement that you're getting, the only context of reinforcement that you're getting is that from your BCBA or RBT. You're not getting generalized reinforcement from outside sources other than the treatment team, or your parents possibly, because parents love when kids can tie their shoes, I'm sure. But you're not going to get that peer-to-peer reinforcement from tying your shoe. Now, if I can have reciprocal conversation, for example, and I can make someone feel good about themselves and connect with them, then I'm going to get a heck of a lot of positive reinforcement from my peers. And guys, this is not a disorder. Autism is not a disorder of my parents hate me because I'm autistic. Autism is not a disorder of my BCBA hates me because I'm autistic. Autism is not a disorder of my RBT hates me because I'm autistic. Autism is a disorder of my peer doesn't like me because I'm autistic. And so I really want to talk about, let's move on to, I want to move on to reducing autism symptoms, because I'm hearing a lot of talk in the ABA community about how medical necessity is about reducing autism symptoms, and that's how insurance companies are going to view it. They want to reduce autism symptoms because autism symptoms cost the insurance company money, bottom line. And so, I really want to think of medical necessity as reducing autism symptoms. Now, I would argue that teaching someone how to tie their shoe, while it does help someone function in life, I don't feel that learning how to tie my shoe had anything to do with the reduction of an autism symptom for me. So, I don't think that, in my opinion, most adaptive living skills are not autism symptoms. Adaptive living skills issues are a result of having autism, or a result of autism symptoms, in my opinion. Just because I have autism doesn't automatically assume that I'm going to not know how to tie my shoe. Just because I have autism doesn't automatically assume that I'm not going to know what a quarter is, or what a dime is, or what a nickel is, and things like that. However, just because I have autism does assume that I'm probably going to struggle with some type of reciprocal conversation, or flirting, or relating to other people. So those are symptoms of autism that need to be addressed. And the problem is, I'm seeing this contradictory statement here. I'm hearing a lot of people say that we want to reduce autism symptoms, but the insurance companies seek social value from lower level adaptive living skills that actually don't reduce autistic symptoms, and don't reduce, barriers to our best life and things like that. And so, I just think that this is a big issue that we have backwards within the community of stakeholders in ABA therapy and autism spectrum disorder. Because, like I said earlier, I've never had a girl reject me because I can't untie my shoe. Obviously, I've never had a girl reject me because I don't know what a quarter is, a nickel is, a dime is. But many girls have rejected me because I have ignored social boundaries and came on too strong, for example, and things like that. But the problem is my insurance companies, my funding sources for treatment tell me that I can only get funding for reasons that girls have not rejected me for. So they're willing to offer funding for reasons that have no social value to the woman, or to the peer-to-peer friend. But they're not willing to offer funding for things that have social value to the girl or to the friend on the other end, receiving end of my social behavior. And that's frustrating as an individual with autism for me, that the insurance company seeks social value from things that have no social value to people on the receiving end of my social behavior in life. And that's something that we need to look into. That's something that we have to really start to dive into in discussion, and things like that. And so, it's frustrating for me that I can get help with all these things that have no social value to anyone in my life, including me. But I can't get treatment. I can't get funding for things that have social value to me and my peers, and things like that. And so, I talk about this in a lot of areas in life, but the problem is we don't have all stakeholders sitting at the table when it comes to medical necessity, because you really want that. If you have a 12-year-old child who's trying to get mainstream back into the classroom, we really want that child's teacher in the conversation of medical necessity, because they're going to be the ones that want that behavior to be dealt with, and that autism symptom to be reduced in order for the kid to come back into the mainstream classroom. And so the problem is teachers aren't often at the table when it comes to medical necessity and ABA. Likewise, for me as an autistic adult, I would want a neurotypical girl that I'm interested in seated at the table when it comes to medical necessity, because her opinion of, well, this autism symptom needs to go away in order for me to date you, would be an important opinion that I respect. And I would want, if she says, you need to not send me a dozen roses, for example, on the first date, and I have a habit of sending a dozen roses on a first date, and she says that behavior needs to go away in order for me to date you and continue the process of getting to know you, then eliminating that behavior becomes medically necessary, in my opinion, for me to make that go away. But yeah, there is no girl sitting somewhere that will reject you because you can't identify coins, or there is no girl sitting somewhere that will reject you because you can't tie your shoe, because that just doesn't matter to a girl, because it's how you make her feel. So now I realize that this is a far out concept, but like, how in the world do we get into a society? We live in a society where how we make someone feel is more important than adaptive living skills of can I tie my shoe or can I identify coins. So how we make someone feel. Life is about social relationships and building connections. Life isn't about how many different pairs of shoes can I tie, or how many different coins can I identify. Life is more about building a relationship to where if I need help tying my shoe, I can ask someone for help tying my shoe. Or if I need help identifying coins or making change, I can ask someone for help identifying coins and making change. And so it's more important that I have the social skills to connect with someone and make them feel good about themselves, so that not only will they want to be my friend, but also they might want to reach out and help me when I need help with an adaptive living skill. And so I would argue that higher level social skills and being able to build connections with my peers has more social value than just simply learning how to tie my shoe or learning how to identify quarters, nickels, and dimes, and things like that. And so yeah, it's a fascinating subject, but I think it's one that we have backwards. Funding sources, traditional funding sources for ABA therapy have it backwards, in my opinion. I'm hoping that when we switch to a value-based system, that we start to take into this account of what autistic people think and like what serves them best and things like that. So now another thing that this leads me to talk about is soft skills for behavior analysts. Obviously, it is my opinion, studying ABA as much as I have, that for me to learn higher level social skills like flirting, like how to create reciprocal conversations, These are skills that require BCBAs and RBTs to have soft skills when they teach me. The problem I see within the field of applied behavior analysis and autism spectrum disorder and insurance companies combining together to make this decision of medical necessity is simply that it is likely that an insurance company would see a BCBA using a soft skill with me as an autistic person would automatically be not medically necessary. So I think that oftentimes soft skills development for BCBAs and RBTs is discouraged because there's no reinforcement for the BCBA or RBT to learn the soft skill. What I mean by that is the BCBA, the RBT, the ABA provider cannot seek reinforcement themselves for providing soft skills to an individual with autism due to the medical necessity model. And so if there's no positive reinforcement for the BCBA or RBT, or maybe more importantly, the owner of the company, if there's no positive reinforcement for me to provide soft skills training to my staff, then why would I do it? Because I realize it's a business, and the bottom line is how much money do we have? Can we survive? And can we keep going? Can we keep serving the autism population? And so if there's no positive reinforcement from my third-party payer for me to teach soft skills to my staff so they can teach soft skills to my individuals with autism, then why would we do it? And so the problem with that is, for me as an individual with autism, and so soft skills that have a lot of social value, that have way more social value than those non-soft skills, like learning how to tie my shoe, or things like that. And so I think we need to open this conversation about how we get funding and how we access funding for teaching BCBAs and RBTs soft skills, which actually translates into teaching the autistic person soft skills as well, and things like that. So medical necessity, it's such a limited thing. It's like, can I tie my shoe? Can I eat? Can I identify coins? Can I navigate Walmart? Can I get groceries for myself? Can I do all these things? But at the end of the day, what has the most social value in my life isn't how I identify coins, isn't how I, tie my shoe, or can I tie my shoe? It isn't, can I go to Walmart and buy things at the grocery store? It's, can I ask someone for help or get someone to go to Walmart for me and help me buy my groceries? It's, can I get someone to help me tie my shoe? It's, can I get a friend to help me identify a coin and make change? It's, can I connect with my peer and develop an authentic peer relationship with them? It's can I relate to people on the job, keep the job? It's not can I tie a trash bag? It's, can I talk to my coworker and have reciprocal conversations with my coworker? These are soft skills, guys, and these are skills that aren't medically necessary in the current model. And I want to argue. I want to propose to you that not teaching soft skills to autistic people, which also translates to not teaching soft skills to behavior analysts, has a cost effect to it. It's those soft skills that are going to have a relationship to someone with autism's mental health. So if I can't tie my shoe, I don't think that doesn't affect me mentally. That doesn't affect my mental health. It doesn't give me anxiety. Now realize this is person-centered, right? Because if you met one person with autism, you met one person with autism. So yes, not being able to tie a shoe might create anxiety for some individuals with autism, but I would venture to say that for most individuals with autism, learning how to tie my shoe is not the most important thing in my life, and it's not going to cause me anxiety. And so I would just, however, what does cause me anxiety is being able to relate to my peers, being able to form those peer-to-peer relationships, connecting with my peers, how I make them feel, and things like that. And so the problem is we're targeting lower level adaptive living skills that don't affect mental health. that don't have an impact on mental health. And so while insurance companies might be well-intentioned in targeting these lower-level adaptive living skills because that's what they've been trained to do, or that's what they think they should do, no. You're actually going to cost yourself in the long run. The insurance company is going to cost themselves more money with mental health care because they fail to address the social component of an individual with autism's life. Yes, they've addressed the adaptive living components of an individual with autism's life, but they have not addressed the social component of an individual with autism's life. And so because they haven't addressed the social component of my life, now as a 37-year-old autistic adult, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have OCD, I have generalized anxiety disorder, I have schizoaffective disorder. All these added contingencies have come into play because no one ever addressed my social issues. Again, I think it's fascinating that at its core, we as a society think of medical necessity as symptom reduction in autism, but yet our medical model of intervention doesn't think that way. So our medical model of intervention thinks tie his shoe, identify coins. That's great, but that doesn't eliminate autistic symptoms for me. And so, like I said it earlier, I'm going to alliterate. Tying my shoe is not a symptom of autism. Not being able to tie my shoe is not a symptom of autism. I'm not likely to be able to go up to someone and say, oh my gosh, I can tie my shoe, I don't have autism anymore. But if I can learn how to socialize and connect with my peers, that's powerful. That's powerful. And I'm going to be able to say, I can go up to my peers and I can make friends. I don't have autism anymore. It's more likely, obviously, I'm exaggerating, right? Because you're still going to have autism. But I'm going to be able to say, I have reduced an autism symptom and I have learned how to make friends. And I'm more likely to be able to say I have reduced an autistic symptom by learning a higher level social skill than I am by learning daily adaptive living skill. Now, let's talk about another added component here. And this might be kind of controversial, but let's think about this. Let's think outside the box. Lower level adaptive living skills actually have, in my opinion, it is just my opinion, my observation across people across the autism spectrum, that lower level adaptive living skills have no social value for many autistic people. Now, to the contrary, those lower level adaptive living skills have significant social value for caregivers of autistic people, for staff, for family members, for parents. So yes, as a mom, I can see I want my child to learn how to tie their shoe because I don't want to tie their shoe for them every single day for the rest of my life. I see you, I hear you. Very important social value to you. But as an autistic individual, learning how to tie my shoe didn't have social value to me. It didn't help me make a friend. And for me, and where I'm at on the spectrum, the only thing that has social value are things that help me make friends, things that help me develop relationships. I hear you as parents saying our social value might be a little bit different than our kids' social value. And that's great. But that also leads me to the question of, and we talk a lot about this, we need to address this issue in the ABA community, and this is why ABA sometimes gets a bad reputation with autistic adults. Because are we addressing skill sets that have social value to our parents, or are we addressing skill sets that have social value to us as the child? Are we teaching someone how to tie their shoe because mom wants the child to learn how to tie their shoe? So are we targeting social behaviors, or are we targeting goals that our parents want us to target? Or are we targeting goals that the individual child with autism would like to target? Now, I realize this is tricky because we can't obviously always know what the child wants to target or what the child's motivations are and things like that. But are we more concerned with the parent's MO than we are with the child's MO? And are we more concerned with the insurance company's MO than we are with the child's MO? And as a BCBA, I'm sure it's difficult for you. Whose MO do I take most? Whose MO has more weight for me? Whose MO has more social value? Who do I listen to? Who do I listen to? And so as a BCBA, I'm sure you're left wondering, like, well, what do I do? What goals do I target? Because does my boss, for example, does my business owner's MO have more social value than the client's MO? And if that's the case, I encourage you to seek out a different company, because that's just not best practice for ABA therapy, in my opinion, only. And so, but I think that we really have to start having a conversation around social value and medical necessity, because we do everyone a disservice when we don't understand social value and socially valued skills. And if we're going to teach someone like me, higher functioning level, Asperger's syndrome, if we're going to try and teach me how to tie my shoe, that's a problem. It's not a socially valued skill for me. And I would argue that it's not a socially valued skill for many autistic individuals. Now, let's talk a little bit more. Dive into this conversation a little bit more about generalizing and applying. I think we have a very broad definition of medical necessity from insurance companies. And we need to sit down with these insurance companies and come up with I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. I feel like in some cases, the definition of medical necessity is very broad. In other cases, the definition of medical necessity is too narrow. Now, the first way that the definition of medical necessity is very broad let's talk about being broad first. It often doesn't operationally define what is medical necessity. And so it might say, like, a skill, for example, it could say learning a behavior that's going to decrease autism symptoms is medically necessary. Well, that's very broad, right? Well, what behavior I could argue that any behavior you're going to teach me is going to decrease my autism symptoms, even though, like I said earlier, tying my shoe doesn't really decrease autism symptoms. But I could make an argument for any behavior is going to decrease autism symptoms. My next question then becomes, oh my gosh, well, you've taught me this behavior at the Autism Center. Because I exhibit this behavior at the Autism Center, I might have less autistic symptoms at the Autism Center than I would if I was using this behavior at the supermarket. So I change environments. Now all of a sudden I'm exhibiting behavior A or behavior B or behavior C. Now all of a sudden I have more autism symptoms because I'm exhibiting this behavior around other people that are not my BCBA or not my RBT, or not my parent. So then my argument becomes, is it more medically necessary for me to treat this behavior because I'm at the supermarket than it is because I'm sitting inside the Autism Center with my therapist? And the answer to that can be yes, absolutely, 100%. Now, to take that even deeper, the question is, depending on the person that I'm around, so if I'm around mother, for example, if I'm around my mom, dealing with this certain behavior might be not medically necessary because mom tolerates the behavior, mom accepts me for the behavior, for who I am, and things like that. Now all of a sudden I'm in a crowded supermarket with 20 people and I'm cashing out, and I'm dealing with the cashier and the child's having a meltdown. I'm having a meltdown. Does the cashier have the same tolerance level for my meltdown, my behavior, as my mom does? No, absolutely not. And so now it's become more medically necessary for me to treat that behavior issue because I'm in a different environment around different people in different contexts. But our definition of medical necessity doesn't allow us to go into detail on what context and what environments is a skill set medically necessary. And basically what I'm saying is, going on to my second point, is that the definition of medical necessity is narrow. And it doesn't really, so let's back up. It's broad because it doesn't operationally define what skills are medically necessary. It just says skills that reduce autistic symptoms. That's great, but we need more clarity. We need more guidance on how to do that. or what skills, what behaviors the insurance company thinks does that. Now that's kind of scary to me. I don't want to let the insurance company take the driver's seat in this conversation by no means, but they need to be seated at the table with the BCBAs, the parents, the stakeholders in this conversation. Now, two, the reason why the definition of ABA is very narrow, the definition of medical necessity in ABA is very narrow, is that it doesn't allow for us to generalize and apply skills and behaviors in different contexts and different social environments. And so because it doesn't allow us to, say, for example, work on a skill at the library or work on a skill at the supermarket, just as it allows us to work on a skill at the autism center, it prevents us from, it's basically saying, well, it's medically necessary for you to know how to do XYZ when you're in the autism center, but it's not medically necessary for you to know how to do XYZ when you're at home with your parents, or when I'm at the supermarket talking to the cashier, or when I'm at the library reading a book. It doesn't allow for us to go into the specifics of the social skill and learning the social skill in different contexts and different social environments. Now, as BCPAs, I posed a question to you guys. Let's operationally define skills, talk about operational definitions of skill sets, operational definition of the behavior. I know the answer to this, in my opinion, but does the operational definition of a certain behavior, like, for example, I headbang in public, what's the operational definition of that behavior? Well, he's headbanging. Obviously, you're going to have a more intense operational definition than that. But so he's headbanging. But my question to BCBAs, to you guys, is, does that operational definition of the behavior change based on the context of the environment that we're in? So if I'm around one kid, for example, is that operational definition of the behavior different than if I'm in a room with 10 kids? Or if I'm at the autism center, does that operational definition of the behavior differ from if I'm at the supermarket and that operational definition of the behavior, and things like that? And so, again, we talk about reducing autism symptoms. Well, I can tell you that we might be able to reduce autism symptoms in the clinic, but does that reduction of autism symptoms generalize and apply to all contexts and all social environments that we're in? So can I eliminate a behavior in the clinic, and then can I go to the supermarket and have that same behavior eliminated? That's the true test of not only the true test of our treatment and our job well done as behavior analysts, but that's a true testament to the problems with medical necessity and the limitations that medical necessity puts on behavior analysts in terms of delivering quality care to individuals with autism spectrum disorder. And so I just really think that, I think that we have to start thinking outside the box when it comes to medical necessity. We have to have a bigger conversation about social value. I think social value is a stakeholder in the conversation. And that's very important. And then we have to look into what stakeholders we need to bring to the table, because what stakeholders are seeking this person having socially valued skills. So that would be my employer, that would be my principal, that would be my teacher, that would be my classmates, that could be my parents, that could be my girlfriend, that could be my date, someone I'm wanting to date, that could be someone I'm trying to make friends with. So as you can quickly see, because of social value and socially valued skills, we develop a lot of stakeholders in the equation. Now, obviously, I understand we can't have 1,000 stakeholders sitting at the table when it comes to medical necessity, but we can take into account the opinions of those stakeholders and when we develop these conversations with medical reviewers and with insurance companies and things like that. And so, bottom line is we're looking for a reduction of autism symptoms. And I'm not so sure, I'm not so convinced that the current medical model is actually, our actions don't match our words within the industry. And I'm not talking about behavior analyst actions. I'm talking about the actions of the insurance companies. So the funding sources actions don't match their words. They say we want a reduction of autism symptoms, but I'm not so sure they're paying for, reimbursing for quality care that's going to reduce autism symptoms across different contexts and different social environments. And I think that's extremely important that we start to have that conversation and persuade the insurance companies to pay for more outside the box interventions and things like that. Because again, it is my opinion as an individual on the spectrum, the higher level of behavior you're dealing with, the more likely it is to reduce an autism symptom. And so, again, I just can't illustrate enough to me how fascinating it is to me that, like, for example, tying my shoe has no social value to me. Learning how to reciprocate conversations with peers has social value to me. Now, again, this leads me to, obviously, autism is a very wide spectrum of things. And so we tend to, obviously I'm thinking about it from the perspective of someone who's Asperger's syndrome, and I'm not thinking about it from the perspective of someone who's nonverbal. It's possible that learning how to tie your shoe could benefit someone who's nonverbal. I completely understand that. But I don't think that has a lot of social value, and I don't think it has a lot of social value in different contexts and different social environments. And that is my argument. And so, bottom line is, the higher level the social skill is, the higher level the skill is, the higher level of the behavior, not only the more important it is that it generalizes in different contexts and different social environments, but also the more important, or the harder it is to make it generalize in social environments, different social environments and different social contexts. And so it is my opinion then, now we're dealing with this question of dosage, and how many hours are we going to approve on this particular skill set or this particular behavior. And so, again, this is where I think insurance companies go backwards, is they say, well, we want to eliminate the autism symptoms. However, it is my experience that an insurance company is more likely to pay for a 40-hour program for someone to learn how to tie their shoe than they are for someone to learn how to create reciprocal conversation with peers. And the problem with that is, it's going to be a heck of a lot harder for me as a BCBA or for me as an RBT to get my client with autism to learn how to recreate reciprocal conversations with me and their peers than it is for me to teach them how to tie their shoe. And so I'm not sure that it's best practice, best use of funding sources to beat lower level adaptive living skills into the ground 40 hours per week than it is to help someone learn a socially valued skill like reciprocal conversation with peers. And I have a hunch that this is why, many autistic adults have a problem with ABA therapy, is because they tend to, they really struggle with this concept of that people want to work on all these adaptive living skills with me, but nobody wants to help me with what I actually need help with socially and emotionally and connecting with my peers and things like that. And so it's likely that they were exposed to 40 hours a week of DTT instead of 40 hours a week of natural environment teaching. And that leads me to another fascinating point, is unfortunately I feel like DTT is considered more medically necessary than NET. And for someone like me, NET is where I'm going to learn the social skills, where I'm going to learn the most social skills, and where I'm going to benefit most from learning how to engage with my peers. And so NET for me is just as medically necessary as DTT, and if not more so. And insurance companies don't share that same sentiment, that same value with me. But yeah, I just think that just overall the conversation needs to switch to include social value in the conversation of medical necessity. But yes, the higher level the skill set is, the more dosage we need, because the skill is not only harder to teach, but it's harder to generalize and apply in different contexts and different social environments, and it'll be a lot harder to navigate learning that skill. And so we think nonverbal. 40 hours a week ABA, nonverbal, 40 hours a week of ABA. That's great. Yes, that's needed. But now I am wanting to learn, I'm verbal, but I want to learn how to conversate with my peers. Reciprocal conversation, 2 hours a week ABA, 2 hours a week ABA, 2 hours a week ABA. No. I have a need that's just as important as someone who's nonverbal. And I need 40 hours a week ABA, 40 hours a week ABA, 40 hours a week ABA. And so we tend to put, I'm not sure that the stakeholders' social value is being taken into account when dosage requirements are being recommended by insurance companies. And so I think that that's a big issue. And I think it's something we can always work on improving in the field. But yeah, so if there's any takeaway from this video, I want us to remember that higher level social skills to me are just as medically necessary, if not more medically necessary than lower level adaptive living skills. And so I think that somehow we've gotten away from what true life means, from what a life with dignity and quality means. For me, a life with quality of life has nothing to do with can I identify a coin, or can I tie my shoe. Quality of life is about the friendships and relationships that I have in my life. And I know that this is the case for many people, not just autistic people, but for many people. But unfortunately, our medical model of medical necessity doesn't operate with the same mindset of what quality of life is for an autistic person. And so let's begin to have a conversation about, well, what does quality of life look like? What does a life of dignity look like? And how do we apply medical necessity models into the reduction of autism symptoms so that this person can live a good quality of life based on what they think their quality of life should be, not based on what we think their quality of life should be. And so I challenge you as providers in the field of ABA to challenge your insurance company, challenge your funding source, and saying, hey, look, this might be your definition of medical necessity, but this isn't helping the client live their best life. So how do we change our definition of medical necessity to help our clients live their best lives, and things like that. And so I think that we can really learn a lot from autistic people and listening to autistic people. And I just think that it's powerful to gain insight from the autistic population in ABA therapy and autism in general. So yeah, that's kind of my presentation for this evening. Hopefully you enjoyed, and if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. And just keep on doing what you're doing, guys. Your BCBAs, I respect you guys. RBTs, I have a lot of respect for you. You guys are great. And you want to change lives. And there's many contingencies that come into play in doing that. And I'm hoping that I can shed some light into some of the issues that might help you overcome some of those barriers to keeping the integrity of ABA and providing, great standard, golden standard care for autistic people. So thanks for watching and have a great day.